We are on page 441.
Yes.
And we are going to read the experience which we first arrived at. And
You have to read it, Rangada.
Pardon?
You have to read it. I mean, we have to redo it.
Okay. In that case, no problem. I'll do that. But before we do that, because our last class was on Tuesday, so 1 week ago, so I'll read out to you what he said in the previous para.
Yes.
Okay. So that gives us the continuity and the sequence. He's saying, Chandra is saying in the previous para, it is commonly held by some philosophical systems that in the lower nature, it is the mind, the manas, that creates the world. Okay? The manas is intimately connected with the individual ego. So it is widely believed that it is the ego that creates the world for man. The ego does not exist in the higher hemisphere. The confusion is over the creator and the created. The ego is created by nature. Okay, it is not created by the supreme. It's the real creation is done by the supermind. Okay, but the lower, the individual, the third level, the lowest level is done by nature. Okay, so that is the confusion. Now, one second, let me correct this. Delete and it is still doing. Why is it coming? Delete and delete. Yeah, now it's okay. So, see, when you go to the higher level of consciousness, there are two things that happen. Your ego disappears, isn't it? You remember that. Ego disappears, you are in a vast, infinite consciousness, and also the world seems to be unreal. So if you put these two things together, oh, the ego has disappeared and also the world has disappeared. Therefore, it is the ego that is creating the world. This is the confusion of the Buddhistic philosophy and the Mayavada philosophy also. But you won't make that mistake if you are, on the contrary, you are in the cosmic consciousness. Because there you don't see the physical world as unreal, you see it as real and you embrace it. But you have got rid of the ego, so you don't make that mistake. But this is a common thing, that's what Sridhar is saying. The confusion over the creator and the created. The ego is created by nature. The universal Purusha expresses himself through innumerable individual Purushas. The Supreme Purusha is the divine, and he sort of apparently breaks himself up into 100,000 million Purushas, and he is engaging and enjoying the adventure of coming from darkness into light. He is enjoying through each one. The ego is a relation between the individual Purusha and the individual Prakriti, your body-mind life, your relation of consciousness with the body-mind life. The escape from the lower nature of body-mind life gives liberation and dissolves the ego, which is a construction of universal nature for the convenience of centralized action in the physical world. If you don't have an ego in the physical world, you'll be like a leaf in the wind. There'll be no purpose, there'll be no orientation, there'll be no focusing of action. It will be very, very loose and haphazard and diffuse. Therefore, ego is absolutely necessary in the physical world. The ego introduces the separation of the infinite multiplicity so that an individualized experience is possible in the physical world. This is necessary because experience in the manifestation of the physical world must be infinite for the soul. So, any number of individual standpoints by universal nature allows infinite experience. The aim is to acquire experience through an individual ideal, individual emotion, individual sensation, and an individual body. That's the purpose of the separation and the ego. But complete independence of the individual is not possible in the world because of the secret oneness and its resultant connectedness, while retaining individual body-mind life. So, infinite experience in a separate individual body-mind life is not possible because of the limited individual's incapacity to How's the infinite? That is the reason why you come again and again into the physical world. Each time you come into the physical world, you are experiencing one aspect of the infinite existence. And that's why through every life, you go on collecting experiences. And when you have collected sufficient number of experiences, the soul goes mature and then realizes that it is not the body, mind, life, but the soul, which is the real entity of man. So that's what Freud said in the previous paragraph. Therefore, the soul has to abandon the exclusivity of body, mind, life and become infinitely impersonal. Absolute individuality in the physical world is not necessary, is not possible, so they say. So for that true individuality, you have to go to the outside the universe. Therefore, the soul has to abandon the exclusivity of the body, mind, life and become infinitely personal. What I said just now, you must not interpret wrongly, because if you go to the supramental level, yes, an individuality is possible in the physical world. A true individuality, not the ego. That is why the ascetic denies, okay, this, once again. Therefore, the soul has to abandon the exclusivity of the body, mind, life and become infinitely impersonal. In the beginning, you have to lose your ego and become impersonal. Then you get the true individuality, which is impersonal and infinite. This implies rejection of body, life, and mind. The soul then becomes impersonal, self-existent, swadhina. Okay? It doesn't depend on anything else. In the physical world, we depend on everything. We are dependent, but not self-dependent. In the spiritual planes of consciousness, you are self-dependent. That is why the ascetic denies God, personal self, and all the other characteristics of the ignorance. The Buddhist and the Advaitin follow the path of the impersonal vast, denying the existence of all limited manifestation. Both Mayavada and the Buddhists assert Purusha as the reality and negate Prakriti as a falsehood and an illusion. This is what is commonly believed, but Sri Aurobindo expresses the opposite viewpoint, that liberation is possible even while performing karma seated in the body, mind, life. This is what he said in the previous paragraph. Now we come back to the thing that we have to read. I read each sentence and you tell me whether it is clear. The experience which we first arrive at by the sort of shortcut to liberation, which we have described as the movement of withdrawal, assists this tendency. So, although Sri Aurobindo is saying that you should not reject the physical world, he is telling you now that the first movement is rejection not of the world, but of the identification with your body, mind, life. That is a necessary thing. First of all, you have to loosen your chains and get rid of the idea that you are body, mind, life. So you have to go on saying to yourself, I am pure soul. I am God's child. I am not body, mind, life. Body, mind, life is a house. It's an instrument given to me, but I am not body, mind, life. You don't have to say that in words, but you have to say that strongly in your own consciousness. That's what he's saying. The movement of withdrawal from body, mind, life into the self, into the spiritual plane of consciousness. Escape from level 1 of body, mind, life to level 2, which is the spiritual plane of consciousness. There the ego disappears and you become infinite, true individual. Now, I read the next sentence. For it's a breaking of the ego and a rejection of the habits of the mentality we now possess. You have to break the construction of what you have. If the house is very, very strong, the house is your body, mind, life, and you have to necessarily break it to escape, then you do that. So that breaking is part of the breaking of the habits. Okay? You get rid of the habits and then you are free. Maybe the house doesn't have any doors and windows from which you can escape. Okay, so all the doors are closed. There is only one door, two doors which are open. One is the psychic being and the other is the self above the head. These are the two doors through which you can go to the level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness. There are no others. Either you go vertically from your head by silencing the head, by silencing the mind, or you go deep into yourself through the psychic being. So these are the two doors. So this saying, for it's a breaking of the ego and a rejection of the habits of the mentality we now possess. For that is subject to matter, the physical matter, okay, mud, and the physical senses, and conceives of things only as forms, objects, external phenomena, and as names which we attach to those forms. When you go to the higher level of consciousness, you realize that these are all external phenomena, only forms, but not reality. We are not aware directly of the subjective life of other beings except by analogy from our own and by inference or derivative perception based upon external signs of speech, action, etc., which our minds translate into the terms of our own subjectivity. What Sridhar is saying is, when we are in the lower consciousness of this separation and the ignorance, we know ourselves to a certain extent, but we know nothing about the others. Okay? I don't know anything about any of you unless I go to the spiritual level of consciousness. Then I develop a psychic sight, and that psychic sight allows me to see subtle things. Then I will come to know you. Okay? If I go to level 2, I can come to know something about you. I'll be able to see your emotions and I'll be able to see your thoughts. I'll understand much more of you than when I'm in level 1, where I'm absolutely ignorant of what you're thinking and what you are feeling. Okay? So this is what Sridhar is saying. So, as a mind, names and forms, they lose their direct objective reality and that indirect subjective reality of our own, which they had to the mind. I'll read that sentence again. It's a very big sentence. When we break out from ego and physical mind into the infinity of the spirit, we still, 1 second, I think now I'll go one sentence above that on page 441. We are not aware directly of the subjective life of other beings except by analogy from our own and by inference or derivative perception based upon the external signs of speech, action, etc., which our minds translate into the terms of our own subjectivity. Whatever we know of ourselves, we extend to others. That's what he's saying. Okay? In fact, this is something very common because what you are, okay, sometimes you think that others also are like you. Okay, it's very interesting. And later on, you discover that it's not like that. They are all. Yeah, this is very common. You examine yourself and you see, oh, this is a human trait. So you think that others also are like you. But it turns out that it's not like that at all. They're quite different. That's what Sridhar is saying. We see the world and others as the mind has accustomed to see them as names and forms. Only in our new experience, where is it gone? Only in our new experience of the direct and superior reality of spirit, they lose that direct objective reality and that indirect subjective reality of their own, which they had for the mind. So, they seem to be quite the opposite of the truer reality we now experience. They seem to be quite the opposite of the truer reality we now experience. When you go to the higher level of consciousness, you see their true being, but not their body-mind life. That mistake we don't make. Our mentality, stilled and indifferent, no longer strives to know and make real to itself those intermediate terms which exist in them as in us, and the knowledge of which has for its utility to bridge over the gulf between the spiritual self and the objective phenomena of the world. So, let's read that sentence again. They seem to be. What is the they? The objective world. Okay? they seem to be quite the opposite of the truer reality we now experience. When you go to the higher level, what we understood earlier is now the opposite. Our mentality, which is stilled and indifferent, note the word stilled, no thoughts, and indifferent, sakshi. You are absolutely unaffected by the positives and the negatives of the physical world. Indifferent. Indifferent can have two meanings. Okay? One can be quite negative. Okay? You are indifferent to the suffering of others. But here he doesn't mean that. He means that you see but you are not affected. That's what it means. Stilled and indifferent. No longer strives to know and make real to itself. Those intermediate terms. What are the intermediate terms? Body, mind, life. Which exist in them as in us, and the knowledge of which has for its utility to bridge over the gulf between the spiritual self and the objective phenomena of the world. Your body, mind, life allows you to bridge the gulf between your own true self and the phenomena in the physical world. If you don't have a body, mind, life, how are you going to be in the physical world? So it is necessary. We are satisfied with the blissful infinite impersonality of a pure spiritual existence. Nothing else and nobody else any longer matters to us. When we rise to the level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness, there is an absolute, normally, unless you are identified with the cosmic consciousness. Normally, there is a complete severance, there is a complete cutting off from the physical world. That's what Sri is saying. Okay? He's saying, we are satisfied with the blissful, infinite impersonality of a pure spiritual existence. The pure spiritual existence, the Brahman consciousness, the self. Okay? No features, nothing, only a vastness, liberation, and complete not being affected by emotions or thoughts or even physical forces. They attack the body, mind and life, but not your consciousness. You become a witness only. Nothing else and nobody else any longer matters to us. And this experience is very interesting, because you can have this experience sometimes. Even ordinary people have this experience. I know of one case where they experienced it for just a few hours, or 2-3 hours. Okay. There is a particular person who was in the nursing home, and she was not very happy at all. Okay, the treatment and everything, and she was not very happy about it. But one day when I went, okay, she is telling me, I am absolutely at peace. Nothing seems to matter. All those things which I thought were so important, okay, they have absolutely no importance at all. And I recognized that as the consciousness going up. And I asked her, how long did this condition last? And she said about 2 hours. So you can experience that for 2 hours. I know of a child in the school, okay, she mentioned the same thing to me, and she said it lasted for a full day. And then she lost it. It is something so different that when you lose it, you realize the value of what you have had. Absolute peace and calm. In the case of the child, the parents had a harsh word with her, and it affected her, and she lost that consciousness of peace and calm. She told me that. So it's possible to experience that. That's what Sri is talking about here. Has it gone? We are satisfied with the blissful infinite impersonality of a pure spiritual existence. Nothing else, nobody else any longer matters to us. What the physical senses show to us and what the mind perceives and conceives about them, and so imperfectly and transiently delights in, seems now unreal and worthless. Okay? Whatever we thought had value, whatever we enjoyed, absolutely have no value at all. We are not and do not care to be in possession of the intermediate truths of being, through which these things are enjoyed by the one and possess for him that value of his being and delight, which makes, as we might say, cosmic existence a thing beautiful to him and worth manifesting. This is a complicated sentence. We look at what it is saying very carefully. What the physical senses show to us. Okay? What does the physical senses show to us? The world. And it does so most imperfectly and also transiently. And yet we delight in it. We take great amount of delight in all that is, our desires are there, and although it vanishes, okay, I eat something tasty, and after some time it goes away, and yet we enjoy it. It is transient, okay, and imperfect. It delight in. Seems now unreal and worthless. When you are in the consciousness of level 2, spiritual plane of consciousness, seems unreal and worthless. We are not and do not care to be in possession of the intermediate truths of being. Which are the intermediate truths of being? He is saying, I think they are the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay, the spiritual planes of consciousness, higher mind, element mind, intuitive mind. They are the intermediate truths. Why is he using the word intermediate? Because it's a between level 1 and level 3. That's why. Okay, intermediate truths of being, through which these things are enjoyed by the one. Okay, so the one is the supreme, level 3, and he is enjoying everything in level 1 through level 2. Okay, so just see what he is saying. Okay? The divine is enjoying everything in the physical world at level 1, but not with the wrong consciousness of level 1, but with the right consciousness of even level 2. Through that he is enjoying everything. Okay? Just think about it, you will see. That's why we have to pay so much attention to the words. Intermediate, okay, of being, and the one. The one is necessarily at level, the higher level, and possess for him that value of his being. He's put an H cap, okay, and delight, which makes, as we might say, cosmic existence a thing beautiful to him and worth manifesting. When you are in level 2, the cosmos is often not beautiful. But if you are at level 3, the cosmos is something beautiful and worth existing, manifesting. Okay? So very clearly, he is referring to level 1, level 2, level 3. I hope you understand. Okay? It's wonderful the way he is describing. We can no longer share in God's delight in the world. When we are at level 2, we can no longer share in God's delight in the world. We feel ourselves to be outcasts. We seem to be exiled from the physical world. On the contrary, it looks to us as if the eternal had degraded itself by admitting into the purity of its being the gross nature of matter, or had falsified the truth of its being by imagining vain names and unreal forms. When you are in the level 2, if you see the physical world as unreal, you wonder why the divine has done that. Okay, that's what he's saying. And therefore there is a problem. At level 2, there is a problem. But the ones who have got the liberation don't care about the problem. They reject the problem and reject the physical world. But Sri Aurobindo does not, because he goes to level 3. Okay. We can no longer share in God's delight in the world. On the contrary, it looks to us as if the eternal, the divine, has degraded itself by admitting into the purity of its being the gross nature of matter, or had falsified the truth of its being by imagining vain names and unreal forms. This is what normally, as I said, when you go to the level 2, you make your mind silent, you see the physical world 90% of the time as unreal. It happens to Sri Aurobindo also. Or else, if we perceive at all that delight, it is with a far-off detachment which prevents us from participating in it with any sense of intimate possession. So, he is saying there can be an exception. He is saying that even at level 2, you can have a glimpse of level 3. Look at the words carefully, you will see that. Or else, if we perceive at all that delight which is there in level 3, okay, it is with a far-off detachment which prevents us from participating in it with any sense of intimate possession. We suddenly realize that there is something, a condition where you can enjoy, but it's not in your possession. You just have a glimpse of it. Okay, any sense of intimate possession, or it is with an attraction to the superior delight of an absorbed and exclusive self-experience. If you get that delight of the divine, it can be in two ways. You can see that suddenly, oh, the physical world also has got a lot of enjoyment. Or it can be the other way around. That's what he's saying. Exclusive self-experience, which does not allow us to stay any longer in these lower terms than we are compelled to stay by the continuance of our physical life and body. So when you go to this whole para, he is describing what happens when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness. Either this he is expanding on the idea he has given the life divine. When you go to the higher level of consciousness in the spiritual planes, three things can happen. Number one, you see the physical world as unreal and reject it. It is useless for you. It's only names and forms and illusion. But rarely you can be in the cosmic consciousness. Okay? You don't reject the physical world. That is very interesting because our that personality whom you all know, okay, that Sadguru, okay, he also silenced his mind and went to the up to the level 2, okay, because he does not speak of God as personal. Therefore, he is very clearly stuck in the spiritual planes of consciousness. But he is not rejecting the physical world. Why? Because he had the experience of the Ananda. Okay, so in that case, you can experience everything in the physical world as very beautiful and you can enjoy it, but you are not at the third level. So at the second level also, you can either enjoy the beauty of the world or you can enjoy the bliss of the higher without possession of the universe. That's what he's saying in this. So it's a little complicated and I'm going maybe too fast. I'll do one thing. I'll read out the summary. I think it will help. It's a big para, so I'll read out the summary. Okay? I'll go slowly. The first movement of separation between watcher and watched. The watcher is the self. The watcher is the witness. And the watched is the physical world. Okay? Even in the integral yoga, actually helps the ascetic withdrawal, although later there is divergence between the two systems. In the beginning, even in integral yoga, you have to separate yourself from the physical world. You have to see it as unreal. You go on telling yourself it is unreal, unreal, unreal. Later on, after you have separated yourself and you have understood your true individuality, then you embrace the world. But not before. If you start embracing the world now, in your ignorance, you will remain attached to it. So, he's saying in the beginning you have to separate yourself. Neti, neti. I am not body, I am not vital, I am not mind. The first movement of separation between the watcher and the watched. The watched is the physical world. Even in the integral yoga, actually helps the ascetic withdrawal. Although later, there is a divergence between the two systems. In the integral yoga, this separation is only a preliminary step. Okay? It's the first step. You don't stop there, like the ascetic. The second step in the integral yoga is the repossession of the lower nature, but this time with mastery and lordship, not with the helpless, not a helpless and abject subjection to the ignorance of the lower nature. When you come down again into your body-mind life, now you are master. But that doesn't happen immediately. It happens after you go to the third level. Okay? But this time with mastery and lordship, not a helpless and abject subjection to the ignorance of the lower nature. In the usual yogas, this separation is sufficient in itself. Level 2 is enough for that. And liberation of soul is considered enough. The liberation of nature is not even attempted. You don't care for the body-mind life. You let it go. Okay? So, this separation, when your consciousness is separated itself from body-mind life, what happens? Several things happen. Number one, the ego is broken. Okay? Number two, it rejects the habits of lower nature which are in the grip of matter and physical senses. Suppose you had habits of, okay, I know some people who are very attached to sweets, okay. They must have a sweet at the end of their lunch or dinner, okay. That disappears miraculously. Rejects the physical habits of lower nature which are in the grip of matter and physical senses. Or it need not be only eating, you have a tendency to become excited and angry. That also disappears. Okay? You are no more angry. Note interestingly that maybe the anger will continue in the body-mind life and you will continue. Others won't realize. But you will see your body-mind life reacting in anger and you wonder, why the hell am I getting angry? I am not affected at all. Okay, that can happen. So that's what he's saying. It rejects the habits of lower nature, which are in the grip of matter and physical senses. We see external objects only as names and forms. When you go to the second level and when you have lost your identification with body-mind life, we see external objects as only names and forms without substantial reality. They seem to be only shadows. We do not see nor know the subjective states of others except by analogy with our own internal state. Even after liberation and destruction of ego and living in the spirit's infinity, we continue to see external objects as mere name and form, nama rupa. But now, the false objective reality which we attributed to those names and forms disappears, and we experience them as empty shells, only transient forms. Compared to the utter reality of the silent self, the world becomes an unreal illusion. We then reject these forms as worthless and we are satisfied with the blissful, impersonal, featureless infinity, which is a spiritual existence, and all manifestation seems valueless and fit only for rejection. There is no interest in enjoyment, and this goes as far as the inability to take pleasure in God's delight. Rather, it is felt as strange that immaculate God should have debased himself in the manifestation of the lower nature. Even if the delight is experienced, it is felt to be very far off, preventing active participation in it. We feel strongly attracted to the exclusive reality which does not allow easy living in the lower nature of the material world. All these experiences he is saying, usually it happens to the Mayavadin and the Buddhists, but it also happens to the integral yoga. The only difference is, in the integral yoga, you don't stop at that level. You proceed and come down and possess the body-mind life and enjoy the reality of the physical world. The others don't. Neither the Buddhists, nor the ascetics, nor the Mayavadins. They reject it permanently. Sri Aurobindo is temporarily rejecting them, temporarily rejecting the body-mind life, and then comes down again, and this time with full mastery and lordship. That's what he's saying. Okay? So, it's nearly 8:30, and sometimes you can get confused by, but we must remember what he's saying right in the beginning. Okay? The very first sentence sets the tone for what he's going to describe. So, look at this first sentence. The experience which you first arrive at by sort of shortcut to liberation, which we have described as a movement of withdrawal, S is the tendency. And then we have a huge para. So he is talking of the liberation from body-mind life. But that's not he doesn't agree with that state. But this is the first step. You have to lose your identification with body-mind life. After that you come back. But in the beginning, that's step number 1. Step number 2, come down again without rejecting the world and become master of body-mind life. Okay? So this is what he is saying. Sometimes we can get lost in the words, and that will happen. That's why I read the summary so that you get the whole thing in a gist. Because sometimes in explanation of words and all that, you get lost. Oh, where were we? Okay, let's go back. So, reading of Srimla is difficult because of that. If most of the words were not important, then we get the gist very easily. But in Srirando, every sentence is important. And every time he is adding a new value to what he is saying. Therefore, he is so difficult to read. So that's why a summary always helps. Okay? So now it is 8:30. Let's see how big the next para is. But if either in the course of our yoga, how big is the para, we'll see. Then we can read it. Oh, it's not a very big one. We can read it. So, any one of you read, who can read? Anyone?
Shall I read?
Yeah, go ahead.
Either in the course of our yoga or as the result of a free return of our realized self upon the world and free repossession of its prakriti by the Purusha in us, we become conscious not only of the bodies and outward self expression of others, but intimately of the inner being, their minds, their souls, and that in them of which their own surface minds are not aware. Then we see the real being in them also, and we see them as selves of ourselves and not as mere names and forms. They become to us realities of the eternal. Our minds are no longer subject to the delusion of striving, unworthiness, or the illusion of unreality. The material life loses indeed for us its old absorbing value, but finds the greater value which it has for the divine Purusha, regarded no longer as the sole terms of our becoming, but as merely having a subordinate value in relation to the higher terms of mind and spirit. It increases by that diminution instead of losing in value. We see that our material being, life, nature are only one poise of the Purusha in relation to its Prakriti, and that their true purpose and importance can only be appreciated when they are seen not as a thing in itself, but as dependent on higher causes by which they are supported from those superior relations. They derive their meaning, and therefore, by conscious union with them, they can fulfill all their valid tendencies and aims. Life then becomes justified to us and no longer stultified by the possession of liberated self knowledge.
So this para is now telling you what happens when you go to the spiritual planes of consciousness. When you are in your body mind life, you see others, but you don't understand them at all. You don't know what they are thinking and what they are having emotions. You don't know. Only by a certain extension from their expressions you can come to know, but sometimes the expressions are all wrong. Okay, they may be smiling, but they may be having very negative thoughts about you. So it's very, it's very deceptive. But when you are in the higher level of consciousness, you see the reality of everybody. You see their thoughts and you see their emotions. And Sridhar is saying something very interesting. He's saying that you know the others better than they know themselves. Okay, you see that very carefully. We'll do the sentence with this para again, but we just see what he's saying. But if either in the course of our yoga or as a result of a free return of our realized self upon the world and a free reposition of its, is this the one that? Yeah, this is the one we have to read. But if either in the course of our yoga or as a result of a free return of our realized self upon the world and a free reposition of its prakriti by the Purusha in us, we become conscious not only of the bodies and outward self-expression of others, but intimately of their inner being, their minds, their souls, and that in them of which their own surface minds are not aware. We know them better than they know themselves. Okay, that's what he's saying. I'll give you a very interesting example. We'll do this next time, but I'll give you a very interesting example. Okay, there was a case where Gautam Chawala, he has passed away, but he used to be very close to mother and he used to always remain upstairs. And he knew almost everything. Each cupboard, what it contained, he knew. Okay. But one day, mother started scolding him for something. Okay. And he told, after the scolding came, he told mother, but mother, I have not done what you are saying I have done. So we would misinterpret that. But if you know what we have just now read, then you will understand. Mother is seeing things in that person which he himself does not know. Okay, so she is trying to correct that wrong movement in him, and he doesn't even know that. So he's saying, but mother, you are scolding me for something I did not do. But the possibility of that thought or that vibration may have been in him. And that's why mother is seeing that and not his, what he has done or not done. Okay. So sometimes she used to do that. So today we'll stop here. Already we have gone 1 minute past, but we'll redo this one. Okay. He is describing the condition of the spiritual plane of consciousness. It is absolutely different from when you are in your body-mind life. You have subtle sight and you have the true individuality, and you can understand the true individuality of others also, which they themselves don't know. Okay. That's the thing. When you went to mother and you did pranam to her, she would look at you and know what you need. Even you don't know what you need, and she will give you that. She used to give you that. Okay? We stop. Yeah, we stop here.
Ask her every
Pardon?
time.
Pardon?
We need to ask whether what we want, or without our asking only the divine will give to us.
Is that Shilpa speaking or who is it?
Yes, yes. I am speaking, Shilpa.
Okay, okay. So I didn't follow exactly what you said, Shilpa. Can you say that again slowly?
That do we need to ask something we need from the divine, or divine will automatically give it to us?
Okay. This is very interesting. And Mother has answered that question. She says that there is nothing wrong in asking the divine for something. There is nothing wrong in that. Mother, give me devotion. Mother, give me knowledge. Okay. There is no problem. You can do that. But she says that if you tell the divine, I don't know what I need, you know better than me what I need, and you give me what I need without my asking, that is certainly a superior condition. So both are allowed, but the other one is more, it is the real condition. You know me better than I know myself, you give me what I need to have. Okay. So, Shilpa, yes, you can ask. Since Mother says very clearly that, of course, you can ask the divine for something that you want. Okay? But she knows better than you what you really need.
Because somewhere I heard that we have to go to Samadhi and ask. You have to ask, otherwise divine will not give. Otherwise the do and doer, that karta and that thing will change. So unless you ask, the divine will not give you.
No, it's not like that exactly. If you open yourself without asking for something, the divine will certainly give you. But if you are asking even with a closed mind, and she will give you, the mother will give you, but will you receive? That's a question. It's a little complicated. It's not that if you don't ask, she won't give you. It's not like that. It depends on how open you are. Okay? You tell, as I told you just now, there are two things. One, mother, I don't have much devotion in me. Please give me devotion. If it is a sincere prayer, of course she will give you. But will you be able to receive? That's a question that arises. Or if in a very sincere, childlike manner you tell the divine, Mother, I don't know what I really want. Yes, I know that I don't have devotion. I know that I don't have knowledge. But you know better than me what I need. So you do that. That is a better condition. That's what uh, she said. She answered this question. Okay. In both the cases, how much are you receiving? That's the question.
It depends upon my eligibility, no?
Pardon?
It depends upon my eligibility to
Yeah,
receive how much.
yeah, they receive the capacity to
Patrata.
receive. Yeah, that's right. Okay,
Okay.
we stop here today. 8:40.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bhagavan.
Thank you, Rangada. Thank you.
Bye-bye.